A lawyer's wife died. At her grave, everyone was appalled. The tombstone read, "Here lies Phyllis, wife of attorney Murray Williams, specializes in divorce and malpractice." Murray burst into tears. His brother said, "You should cry, pulling a cheap publicity stunt like this." Murray said, "You don't understand. I gave them my business card." His brother apologized. "And they didn't include the phone number." And they didn't. Brian was about to marry Beryl when his father took him to one side. "When I married your mother, the first thing I did when we got home was take off my trousers," he said. "I gave them to your mother and told her to put them on. When she did, they were enormous on her, and she said to me that she couldn't possibly wear them, as they were too large. I told her, of course they're too big. I wear the trousers in this family, and I always will. Ever since that day, we have never had a single problem." Brian took his father's advice, and as soon as he got Beryl alone after the wedding, he did the same thing, took off his trousers, gave them to Beryl, and told her to put them on. Beryl said that the trousers were too big and she couldn't possibly wear them. "Exactly," replied Brian. "I wear the trousers in this relationship, and I always will. I don't want you to forget that." Beryl paused and removed her knickers and gave them to Brian. "Try these on," she said. So he tried them on, but they were too small. "I can't possibly get into your knickers," said Brian. "Exactly," replied Beryl. "And if you don't change your bloody attitude, you never will." An elderly couple were driving across the country. The wife was driving when she got pulled over by the highway patrol. The officer said, "Ma'am, did you know you were speeding?" The woman, hard of hearing, turns to her husband and asks, "What did he say?" The old man yells, "He says you were speeding." The patrolman says, "May I see your license?" The woman turns to her husband and asks again, "What did he say?" The old man yells, "He wants to see your license." The woman gave the officer her license. The patrolman says, "I see you are from Arkansas. I spent some time there once and went on a blind date with the ugliest woman I've ever seen." The woman turned to her husband and asked, "What did he say?" And the old man yells, "He said he knows your mother!" A girl asks her boyfriend to come over Friday night and have dinner. The girl tells her boyfriend that she would like to do it for the first time. The boy is ecstatic, but he has never done it before, so he goes to the pharmacist to get some protection. The pharmacist helps the boy for over an hour and tells the boy everything there is to know about protection. At the register, the pharmacist asks the boy whether he would like the 3-pack, 10-pack, or family pack. Boy picks the family pack because he thinks he will be really busy since it is his first time. The boy shows up at the girl's house and she takes her to the dinner table where her family is sitting. The boy quickly offers to say grace and bows his head. 1 minute pass and the boy is still in deep prayer with his head down. This continues for 20 minutes and he shows no movement. Finally, the girl leans over and whispers, "I had no idea you were so religious." The boy whispers back, "I had no idea your father was a pharmacist." Two men are walking down the street when a dog that's foaming at the mouth viciously bites one of them, then runs off. "Oh my God," cries the other man, "that dog must have rabies." "Rabies?" says the bitten man. Looking frightened and shaky, he takes a notepad and a pen out of his pocket and starts to scribble something down. "Wait," says his friend. "We can get you tested and vaccinated for rabies if we go to the hospital right now. You don't have to start writing your will." "It's not a will," the bitten man says with an evil grin. "It's a list of people I hate that I want to bite." A man was driving his motor caravan when he saw the flash of a traffic camera. He figured that his picture had been taken for exceeding the limit, even though he knew that he was not speeding. Just to be sure, he went around the block and passed the same spot, driving even more slowly, but again the camera flashed. Now he began to think that this was quite funny, so he drove even slower as he passed the area again, but the traffic camera again flashed. He tried a fourth time with the same result. He did this a fifth time and was now laughing when the camera flashed as he rolled past, this time at a snail's pace. 2 weeks later, he got 5 tickets in the mail for driving without a seatbelt. Little Johnny comes home from Sunday school with a black eye. His father sees it and says, "Johnny, how many times do I have to tell you not to fight with the other boys?" "But Dad, it wasn't my fault. We were all in church saying our prayers. We all stood up and my teacher in front of me had her dress in the crack of her butt. I reached over and pulled it out. That's when she hit me." "Johnny," the father said, "you don't do those kind of things to women." Sure enough, the very next Sunday, Johnny came home with the other eye black and blue. Johnny's father said, "Johnny, I thought we had a talk." "But Dad," Johnny said, "it wasn't my fault. There we were in church saying our prayers. We all stood up and my teacher in front of us had her dress in the crack of her butt." Then Louis, who was sitting next to me, saw it, and he reached over and pulled it out. Now I know she doesn't like this, so I pushed it back in. A letter from Grandma. Life with the Gentleman. Dear grandson, it's been a while since I saw you, and I must confess, a few things have changed since then. I've become a bit of a social butterfly in my golden years. In fact, I'm seeing 5 gentlemen regularly now. Every morning starts with Will Power. Without him, I'd never make it out of bed. Then I have a visit with John. You know, the porcelain kind. After that, Charlie Horse usually drops by. He tends to hang around a little too long and always makes his presence known. By midday, Arthur Rittis shows up and insists on taking me from joint to joint. Quite the tour guide, that one. By the end of the day, I'm so worn out that I collapse into bed with Ben Gay. He's the only one who knows how to soothe me. Oh, and I've been catching the eye of a new guy lately. Alzheimer. We're not serious yet, but he keeps making me forget what I was doing. Life sure is different now, but I'm keeping a sense of humor about it. Love always, Grandma P.S. The preacher stopped by recently. He told me I should be thinking more about the hereafter. I told him I already do. Every time I walk into a room, I ask myself, now, what am I hereafter? Little Johnny came home from school to see the family's pet rooster dead in the front yard. Rigor mortis had set in, and it was flat on its back with its legs in the air. When his dad came home, Johnny said, "Dad, our rooster's dead, and his legs are sticking in the air. Why is his leg sticking in the air?" His father, thinking quickly, said, "Son, that's so God can reach down from the clouds and lift the rooster straight up to heaven." "Gee, Dad, that's great," said little Johnny. A few days later, when Dad came home from work, Johnny rushed out to meet him yelling, "Dad, Dad, we almost lost Mom today." "What do you mean?" said Dad. "Well, Dad, I got home from school early today and went up to your bedroom, and there was Mom flat on her back with her legs in the air screaming, 'Jesus, I'm coming, I'm coming!' If it hadn't have been for Uncle George holding her down, we'd have lost her for sure." While touring through rural Ireland, a famous American golfer stopped at a tiny petrol station to fill up his sleek black BMW. The old man running the pump gave him a cheerful wave and said, "Top of the morning to you, lad." "Good morning," the golfer replied with a polite nod. As he leaned over to grab the fuel nozzle, 2 small plastic objects fell from his shirt pocket onto the pavement. The attendant picked one up, turned it over in his hand, and asked, "Now what in the name of St. Patty is this strange little thing?" "Oh, that?" The golfer chuckled. "It's called a tee. I use it to rest my golf ball on when I'm hitting my drive." The old man froze. His eyes went wide. He stared at the BMW, then back at the tee. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "And here I thought German engineering had already done it all. Now they've built a car that comes with a place to park your balls." An Italian workwoman wants a job, but the foreman won't hire him until she passes a little math test. "Here's your first question," the foreman said. "Without using numbers, represent the number 9. "Without a numbers?" the Italian says. "That's easy." And he proceeds to draw 3 trees. "What's this?" the boss asks. "Have you got a no brain? Tree and tree and tree makes a 9, says the Italian. Fair enough, says the boss. Here's your second question. Use the same rules, but this time the number is 99. The Italian stares into space for a while, then picks up the picture that he has just drawn and makes a smudge on each tree. There you go. The boss scratches his head and says, How on earth do you get that to represent 99? Iacha of da trees is a dirty now, so it's dirty tree and dirty tree and dirty tree. That's a 99. The boss is getting worried that he's going to actually have to hire this Italian, so he says, All right, last question. Same rules again, but represent the number 100. The Italian stares into space some more. Then, she picks up the picture again and makes a little mark at the base of each tree and says, There you go, 100. The boss looks at the attempt. You must be nuts if you think that represents 100. The Italian leans forward and points to the marks at the base of each tree and says, A little doga come along and shitta by each a tree. So now you got a dirty tree and a turd, dirty tree and a turd, and dirty tree and a turd day to make a 100. So when I start... One day, Johnny's dad goes to school and talks to his teacher and says, Don't bet with Johnny. His teacher is puzzled. That same day, Johnny shows up and says to his teacher, I bet you $25 I can guess what color underwear you are wearing. His teacher laughs and agrees. She goes to that bathroom, removes her underwear. After class, Johnny goes up to her and says, I bet your underwear is blue. His teacher smiles and says no, and lifts up her skirt to show she is not wearing any underwear. Johnny smiles and says, My dad will pay you the $25. The teacher shows up to Johnny's house and talks to his dad and tells him that Johnny did not correctly guess her underwear color because she was not wearing any. His dad says that just won a $100 bet with me about seeing your pussy. A priest, a lawyer, and an engineer are to be guillotined. The priest puts his head on the block. The rope is pulled, but nothing happens. He claims he has been saved by divine intervention and is released. The lawyer puts his head on the block, but again, nothing happens. He claims he can't be executed twice for the same crime and is set free. The engineer places his head under the guillotine. He looks up at the release mechanism and says, Wait a minute, I see your problem. Johnny walked in the ice cream store. He asked for 1 scoop of chocolate and 1 scoop of vanilla. The man behind the counter says, I'm sorry, but we are all out of chocolate. So Johnny says, in that case, I'll take 1 scoop of strawberry and 1 scoop of chocolate. The man looks at Johnny and says, I'm sorry, but we are all out of chocolate. Johnny thinks for a minute and says, Okay, 1 scoop of Rocky Road and 1 scoop of chocolate. The man asks Johnny, Can you spell the van in vanilla? Johnny replies, V-A-N? The man asks, Can you spell the straw in strawberry? S-T-R-A-W, replies Johnny. Can you spell the in chocolate? The man asks, to which Johnny replies, There is no chocolate. That's what I've been trying to tell you. During the wedding rehearsal, the groom approached the pastor with an unusual offer. Look, I'll give you $100 if you'll change the wedding vows. When you get to the part where I'm supposed to promise to love, honor, and obey and be faithful to her forever, I'd appreciate it if you'd just leave that out. He passed the minister a $100 bill and walked away satisfied. On the day of the wedding, when it came time for the groom's vows, the pastor looked the young man in the eye and said, Will you promise to kneel before her, obey her every command and wish, serve her breakfast in bed every morning of your life, and swear eternally before God and your lovely wife that you will not ever even look at another woman as long as you both shall live? The groom gulped and looked around and said in a tiny voice, Yes. Then leaned toward the pastor and hissed, I thought we had a deal. The pastor put a $100 bill into the groom's hand and whispered, She made me a better offer. A psychology professor starts his lecture by telling the students, Today we'll learn about the 3 stages of human emotion: surprise, irritation, and rage. With that, he takes his phone out of his pocket, puts it on speaker, and dials a random number. "Hello, may I please speak to Dave?" says the professor when the other person answers. "No, I'm sorry. You have the wrong number," says the person on the other end. "You see that, students? That's surprise. Now allow me to show you what irritation sounds like." He picks up the phone again and dials the same number. When it answers, the professor asks, "Hi, can Dave come to the phone?" "I told you you have the wrong number." "That's irritation, my friends," says the professor. "Now let's look at what rage looks like." He picks up the phone and dials the number again. When it answers, he asks, "Is Dave available?" "Listen, you f***ing dipshit. If you call this number again, I'll come over, break that phone in half, and shove it up your ass. And if it doesn't fit, I'll push it in with my c***." And that's rage. "Professor, you forgot the fourth stage," says a young man in the front rows. "And what might that be?" asks the professor. "It's called the stage of total confusion. Allow me to demonstrate." He comes up to the podium, takes the professor's phone, and dials the same number. "Hello, this is Dave. Has somebody called me today?" Several men are in the locker room of a local gym. A cell phone on a bench rings, and a man puts the phone on speaker and begins to talk. Everyone else in the room stops to listen. "Hello," says the man. A woman answers, "Honey, it's me. Are you at the club?" "Yes," the man replies. The woman continues, "I'm at the mall now, and I found this beautiful leather coat. It's only $1,200, down from $1,900. Is it okay if I buy it?" "Sure, go ahead if you like it that much," says the man. "Oh, thanks so very much," says the woman. "I also stopped by the Mercedes dealership this morning and saw the new models. There was one that I really liked." "How much?" asks the man. The woman replies, $80,000. "Okay," says the man. "But for that price, I want it with all the optional extras." "Great," the woman says. "Oh, and one more thing. The house that we looked at last year is back on the market. They're asking $500,000. The man replies, "Well then, go ahead and make them an offer, but no more than $250,000. "Love you, bye," says the man as he hangs up. The other men in the locker room are looking at him in absolute astonishment. Then he smiles and asks, "Anyone know whose phone this is?" John was sitting outside his local pub one day, enjoying a quiet pint and generally feeling good about himself, when a nun suddenly appears at his table and starts decrying the evils of drink. "You should be ashamed of yourself, young man. Drinking is a sin. Alcohol is the blood of the devil." Now John gets pretty annoyed about this and goes on the offensive. "How do you know this, sister?" "My mother superior told me so." "But have you ever had a drink yourself? How can you be sure that what you are saying is right?" "Don't be ridiculous. Of course I have never taken alcohol myself." "Then let me buy you a drink. If you still believe afterwards that it is evil, I will give up drink for life." "How could I, a nun, sit outside this public house drinking? I'll get the barman to put it in a teacup for you, then no one will ever know." The nun reluctantly agrees, so John goes inside to the bar. "Another pint for me and a triple vodka on the rocks." Then he lowers his voice and says to the barman, "And could you put the vodka in a teacup?" The barman replies, "Oh, it's that nun again, is it?" Johnny sits at the bar staring at his drink when a large, troublemaking biker steps up next to him, grabs his drink, gulps it down in one swig, and menacingly says, "Well, thank you. What you gonna do about it?" Johnny burst into tears. "Come on, man," the biker says. "I didn't think you'd cry. I can't stand to see a man crying. What's your problem?" "This is the worst day of my life," Johnny says. "I'm a complete failure. I was late to a meeting and my boss fired me. When I went to the parking lot, I found my car had been stolen and I don't have any insurance. I left my wallet in the cab I took home. I found my wife in bed with the postman and then my dog bit me. So I come to this bar to work up the courage to put an end to it all. I buy a drink, drop a capsule in, and sit here watching the poison dissolve, and then you show up and drink the whole thing. But enough about me. How's your day going? An American farmer was touring the Australian outback and chatting with a local rancher. The Aussie proudly waved his hand across his land and said, "That's my wheat field. Pretty big, huh?" The American shrugged and replied, "That's nice, but back home in Texas, our wheat fields are so wide the sun sets before we finish plowing." A little later, the Australian pointed to his herd of cattle grazing nearby. "These are my cows," he said with a grin. The Texan smirked. "Ours are bigger. We've got longhorns so massive they cast shade like oak trees." Just then, a group of kangaroos came hopping by in the distance. The American's jaw dropped. "What on earth are those?" The Aussie raised an eyebrow and said, "What? Don't y'all have grasshoppers in Texas?" A guy goes into a bar with his dog and asks for a drink. Instantly, the bartender says, "You can't bring that dog in here." The guy replies, "This is my seeing eye dog." "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," says the bartender, feeling bad. "Here, the first one is on me." The man takes his drink, then goes to a table near the door. Another guy walks into the bar with a dog. The first guy stops him and says, "You can't bring that dog in here unless you tell the bartender it's a seeing eye dog." The guy thanks him, continues to the bar, and asks for a drink. The bartender yells, "Hey, you can't bring that dog in here." The guy replies, "This is my seeing eye dog." The bartender says, "No, I don't think so. They don't use Chihuahuas as seeing eye dogs." The man pauses for a moment, then says, "What? They gave me a freaking Chihuahua?" A 95-year-old man and his 94-year-old wife see a lawyer about a divorce. The lawyer asks them when they got married. "I was 19, says the man. "That means you've been married for 75 years at least," the lawyer points out. "Yes, and all of it misery," says the woman. "Really? When did you start to regret the marriage?" "Almost immediately," says the man. "I hated her after about 2 years, and every year it gets worse. Everything about her is obnoxious and irritating." "Oh, Lord," says the woman. "I lasted 3 years, but after that tolerating him in any way has been a huge problem. He has awful habits and treats me like trash." The lawyer thinks for a moment. "Well, I can help you to get divorced. But why did you wait so long to apply for one if you've hated each other the whole time?" She says, "We were waiting for the children to die." Larry is 75 years old and has played golf every day since his retirement 15 years ago. One day he arrives home looking downcast. "That's it," he tells his wife. "I'm giving up golf. My eyesight has become so bad that once I hit the ball, I can't see where it landed." His wife sympathizes with him and makes him a cup of tea. As they sit down, she suggests, "Why don't you take my brother with you next time?" "Oh, that's no good," Larry sighs. "Your brother is 85. He can't help." "He may be 85, says his wife, "but his eyesight is perfect." So the next day, Larry heads off to the golf course with his brother-in-law. He tees up, takes a mighty swing, and squints down the fairway. He turns to his brother-in-law and asks, "Did you see where the ball went?" "Of course I did," answers his brother-in-law. "I have perfect eyesight." "Well, where did it go?" Larry asks. His brother-in-law replies, "I don't remember." The rain was pouring down in heavy sheets, drenching everything in sight. Outside a cozy Irish pub, an old man stood beside a large puddle, completely soaked. In his hand, he held a stick with a string dangling into the water, staring into it with focused patience, like he was truly fishing. A well-dressed gentleman happened to be passing by. Curious and feeling a bit sorry for the old man, he stopped and asked, "What on earth are you doing out here in the rain?" Without looking up, the old man replied plainly, "Fishing." Taken aback but touched by the sight, the gentleman said, "Why don't you come inside and have a drink with me? There's no sense in standing out here getting soaked." The old man gave a grateful nod and followed him into the warmth of the pub. They ordered 2 glasses of fine Irish whiskey and settled in by the fire. After a while, the gentleman couldn't help but ask, "So, how many have you caught today?" The old man grinned, lifted his glass with a twinkle in his eye, and said, "You're number 8. For her 85th birthday, a sweet old lady received gifts from her 3 grown sons, each determined to impress her. The oldest, a wealthy businessman, gifted her a massive new house with marble floors, 10 bathrooms, and a garden that needed a full-time staff. The middle son, a luxury car dealer, delivered a brand new limousine with all the bells and whistles, even had her name stitched into the leather seats. The youngest son, who didn't have as much money but knew his mom's deep love for her faith, decided to find something meaningful. After months of searching, he discovered a rare parrot trained by monks. This bird could quote the entire Bible, chapter and verse, and explain every passage in detail. The parrot cost more than his car and apartment combined, but he bought it without hesitation and had it flown in from a monastery overseas. A week later, the mother sent thank you letters. To her eldest, "Thank you for the mansion, dear. It's lovely, but it echoes too much. I've listed it for sale and will be moving into a cozy little cottage by the park." To her middle son, "The car is beautiful, darling, but I need a ladder just to get in. I've traded it for a nice little hatchback with heated seats." And to her youngest, "Oh, my sweet boy, you always did know my taste. Thank you so much. That roasted chicken was the most flavorful bird I've ever had." A well-dressed lady boarded a flight from Zurich and found herself seated next to a kind-looking elderly priest. After a bit of polite conversation, she leaned over and whispered, "Father, may I ask you a small favor?" The priest smiled warmly. "Of course, my child. What is it?" "Well," she began, glancing around nervously, "I bought a rather expensive beauty device, something to remove hair, and I'm afraid I'll have to pay a hefty duty on it at customs. Would you mind hiding it under your robe?" The priest paused, then nodded gently. "I can help you, but just so you know, I won't tell a lie." Relieved, the woman handed him the small device, and he tucked it under his cassock. When they landed, the priest stepped up to the customs officer, who asked, "Good afternoon, Father. Anything to declare?" The priest replied, "From the top of my head to my waist, I have nothing to declare." The officer raised an eyebrow. "And from the waist down?" The priest calmly said, "Down there, I carry a remarkable little tool designed for women, but it's never been used." The customs officer blinked, then burst out laughing. "Carry on, Father. Next." And just like that, the lady's secret was safe, thanks to a priest with a holy sense of humor. A policeman was interrogating 3 guys who were training to become detectives. To test their skills in recognizing a suspect, he shows them a picture for 5 seconds and then hides it. He then asks, "This is your suspect. How would you recognize him?" The first guy answers, "That's easy. We'll catch him fast because he only has one eye." The policeman says, "Well, duh, that's because the picture I showed is his side profile." Slightly flustered by this ridiculous response, he flashes the picture for 5 seconds at the second guy and asks him, "This is your suspect. How would you recognize him?" The second guy smiles and says, "Ha! He'd be easy to catch because he only has one ear." The policeman angrily responds, "What's the matter with you two?" Of course, only one eye and one ear are showing, because it's a picture of his side profile. Is that the best answer you can come up with? Extremely frustrated at this point, he shows the picture to the third guy and in a very testy voice asks, "This is your suspect. How would you recognize him?" He quickly adds, "Think hard before giving me a stupid answer." The third guy looks at the picture intently for a moment and says, "The suspect wears contact lenses." The policeman is surprised and speechless because he really doesn't know himself if the suspect wears contacts or not. Well, that's an interesting answer. Wait here for a few minutes while I check his file and I'll get back to you on that. He leaves the room and goes to his office, checks the suspect's file on his computer, and comes back with a beaming smile on his face. Wow, I can't believe it. It's true. The suspect does, in fact, wear contact lenses. Good work. How were you able to make such an astute observation? That's easy, the third guy replied. He can't wear regular glasses because he only has one eye and one ear. Two girls are working on the cash registers at the grocery store. You know, I can always tell the single men from the men in relationships. How can you do that? Watch. I'll show you on the next customer. A man approaches the register with his shopping. A single tomato, a single pork chop, a single potato, a single tin of beans, and a single small onion. You're single, aren't you? How did you know? Because you're a right ugly cunt. A little boy sees a cowboy. A woman stops at a rural gas station so her little boy can use the bathroom. When he comes out, his mom is standing in line at the register, and behind her is a cowboy. The boy is really excited. He goes up to the man and asks, "Excuse me, mister, are you a real cowboy?" The cowboy says, "I sure am, son. You see this hat? It keeps the sun off my face. This bandana keeps the dust from the herd out of my mouth. These chaps keep the brush from tearing up my legs." The boy looks at the cowboy's feet, and the cowboy says, "My tennis shoes keep people from thinking I'm a California truck driver." Redneck Ray is sitting at a bar in Houston, silently nursing a beer. Suddenly, a big burly man walks in and slaps Ray so hard that he falls off of his stool. "That was a karate chop from Korea," says the big man proudly. Ray sighs, gets up, brushes the dust off his clothes, and then sits down on the stool and continues to drink his beer. Suddenly, he gets hit so hard that he flies into the wall. "That was a kung fu chop from China," chuckles the big man. At this point, Ray has had enough. He gets up, brushes off the dust, and calmly leaves the bar. After about an hour, Ray returns, walks up behind the big guy, and whacks him so hard behind his ear that he blacks out. Ray looks at the bartender and says, "When he comes to, why don't you tell him, that was a shovel from the hardware store in Houston." Just after dinner one evening, my son came rushing into the kitchen looking distressed. "Dad, something's wrong with my lizard," he said. "He's just laying there on his back. I think he's dying." Trying to stay calm, I followed him to his room. One of his two pet lizards was, in fact, lying belly up in the tank, looking rather dramatic. My wife appeared in the doorway behind us. "Oh my goodness," she gasped. "I think she's having babies." "Wait, what?" My son blinked. "They're both males," I added. "We named them Max and Leo, remember? 2 boys." "Well," she replied, "maybe one's not a boy after all." "What do you want me to do?" she asked. "Make them wear name tags and pronouns?" "Maybe just check before buying next time," I said through a tight smile. The rest of the family gathered around the tank like we were witnessing a wildlife documentary. "This is it, kids," I declared. "A beautiful, natural moment. We might actually witness a lizard giving birth." "Gross," my daughter muttered. "Do we have to watch?" The lizard twitched and we all leaned in. "Look!" my son cried. "I saw something move. I think it's a foot." "Or a tail," my wife whispered. "Oh, no, maybe it's Breach." "Do something, Dad," my son begged. So there I was, crouched in front of a reptile tank, trying to perform what I imagined was a lizard version of emergency midwifery. Carefully, I reached in. Every time I tried to grab the foot, it slipped away. "Should we call someone?" my daughter asked. "Like Animal 911 or something?" Finally, we loaded the tank into the car and raced to the vet. My son whispered to the lizard, "You're gonna be okay, buddy. Just hang in there." The vet took the lizard to the back and returned a few minutes later, clearing his throat. "Your lizard is fine," he said. We sighed in relief. "But there's something you should know," the vet added, lowering his voice. This wasn't labor. Your lizard is a young male, and sometimes they lie on their back when they're, discovering themselves. My wife tilted her head. You mean, yes, the vet nodded quickly. He's, maturing. You have a very healthy, very normal teenage lizard. The room went silent, and then my wife started to laugh. Quietly at first, then louder, until she was crying. What is so funny? I asked, already regretting it. She could barely breathe. I just can't get the image out of my head of you trying to help him deliver something that wasn't exactly a baby. We left the vet's office in total silence, except for my wife, who kept bursting into giggles all the way home. My son leaned over and whispered, "Thanks for trying to help, Dad. I think Max is really grateful." "Oh, you have no idea," my wife replied, choking on laughter again. 2 lizards, $120. 1 terrarium, $45. Emergency vet visit, $60. Watching your dad try to deliver an imaginary baby from a lizard in the middle of an identity crisis, absolutely priceless.